Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you very much for joining today. We'd like to seek the kind blessings of Shri Radha and Krishna, Radha Madhav, Radha Shyamsundar, Krishna Balaram, Gaunitai, Srila Prabhupada, Guru Maharaj, and also the assembled Vaishnava, so that we can continue with the 11th Canto, 22nd chapter today. And this is one of the verses in this chapter.
Itinana pasankhayanam tattvanam shipikritam sarvam nyayam yukti matvad vidusham kim ashobanam. Translation: Thus great philosophers have analyzed the material elements in many different ways. All of their proposals are reasonable, since they are all presented with ample logic. Indeed, such philosophical brilliance is expected of the truly learned.
So this is Lord Krishna. He's basically saying the philosophers, there are so many different philosophies, and specifically he's talking about the counting of the elements. Some philosophers say there's 28, others say it's 16. So Parikshit Maharaj, who was it? Uddhav was asking Lord Krishna, how come they're saying these different things? Who's right and who's wrong? And Krishna has given such a wonderful reply that, yeah, these are truly learned personalities, and they may analyze the material elements in different ways, but all of them, they have their logic behind it, and it's all of them are reasonable. This is the beauty of the Lord. You know, He will accept independent thinking. He doesn't want blind followers. He wants followers who he wants those who love him, who care, who can think for themselves. So this is really very revealing, actually, this chapter. Anyway, enumeration of the elements of the material nature. This is the name of the chapter. This chapter enumerates and categorizes the natural elements, explains the differences between the male and female natures, and describes birth and death. And Uddhav inquires, how many different elements of creation have been listed by great sages? You have described a total of 28. So Uddhav's picked him up. So what are these 28? God, who's the basis of everything. Jiva soul, the Mahat Tattva, false ego, the 5 gross elements. So those are earth, water, fire, air, ether. And then the 10 senses, this is sound, sight, etc., etc. The mind, the 5 subtle objects of perception, the 3 modes of nature. So that all totals 28. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 9, 19, 20, 25, and then 3, 28. But other authorities, this is Uddhav is saying, say that there are 26 elements, while others cite 25, or else 7, 9, 6, 4, 11, like that. And even others say there are 17, 16, or 13. What did each of these sages have in mind when they calculated the creative elements in such different ways? So, very interesting question. So Lord Krishna replies, because all material elements are present everywhere, it is reasonable that different learned Brahmins have analyzed them in different ways. So he's really accepting, it's okay. They don't have to agree with me. All such philosophers spoke under the shelter of my mystic potency, and thus they could say anything without contradicting the truth. What philosophers argue, I don't choose to analyze this particular case in this way that you have. It is simply my own insurmountable energies that are motivating their analytical disagreements. So very interesting how Krishna is justifying and defending the philosophers. But for those who have fixed their intelligence on me and control their senses, differences of perception disappear. Consequently, the very cause for argument is removed. Because whether it's 28 or 16 or 17 or 13, who cares? What difference does it make to anybody? As long as we're focused on the Supreme Lord, that's what matters. Right? So Krishna's also explaining that don't get carried away with the differences in the philosopher's analysis. It doesn't make a difference. They're all right. As subtle and gross elements mutually enter into one another, philosophers may calculate the number of basic material elements in different ways according to their personal desire. I think it was Prabhupada who said that if a guru doesn't have a different opinion from the previous acharya, he's not really a guru. Or something to that effect. Something to that effect. How does he distinguish himself? He has to have something to distinguish him. Therefore, no matter which of these thinkers is speaking, and regardless of whether in their calculation they include material elements within their previous subtle causes, or else within their subsequent manifest products, I accept their conclusion as authoritative, because a logical explanation can always be given for each of the different theories. So this is classic. This is amazing. Krishna is so flexible. So there's no qualitative difference between the living entity and the supreme control. So we're the same as God, but only in terms of quality, not in terms of quantity. To presuppose any distinction between them is senseless. Ordinary knowledge is simply a quality of material nature, not of the soul proper. The raw substance of material nature is designated according to its different phases. In the mode of goodness, it is known as knowledge. In the mode of passion, it's known as activity. In the mode of darkness, it's known as ignorance. Time is another name of the Supreme Lord, and another name for material propensity is Mahatattva. Mahatattva is like the aggregation of all the elements. The 25 elements of nature are, so then the Lord explains, the Lord, nature, Mahatattva, false ego, ether, air, fire, water, earth, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, speech, hands, feet, genitals, anus, mind, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell. Due to the unmanifest Supreme Personality merely glances at nature and material nature, which is under the control of the Supreme Lord, then assumes the forms of causes and effects. So this one unadulterated material nature divides into all these different elements and carries out the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material world. Even though the Purush and Prakriti appear non-different to superficial vision, there is an intimate difference between the two. Material creation is produced from the modes of Prakriti, and its quality is transformational. Transformation, always changing. Material nature is always changing due to the effect of time. The living entities who are inimical to the law, Supreme Law, take on and give up various kinds of material bodies through the agency of their own material work. But those who are ignorant of the self, because of being bewildered by illusion, do not understand this. So, very interesting. Otherwise, what Krishna is effectively saying is the soul is higher than the Prakriti. But because of illusion, this understanding is not there. And he submits himself to Prakriti, becomes entangled in Prakriti. Krishna explains the different numbers which philosophers have analyzed the material elements in different ways. And he states that all of their proposals are reasonable, since they are all presented with ample logic. Indeed, such philosophical brilliance is expected of the truly learned. So that was the verse that we read. Okay, Uddhav inquired. So then Uddhav inquires further. So why does he accept? It's non-consequential. It doesn't matter. The philosophers, they're all learned. Why get into an argument over nothing? So Krishna accepts all the logic, even though they're presented differently. Shows his flexibility. But he also explains that those who are surrendered to him, for them, makes no difference. They don't even bother differentiating between the different elements. Uddhav inquired then, although nature and the living entity are constitutionally distinct, there appears to be no difference between them because they are found residing within one another. So we live in this material, in this body. We can't distinguish what is the body, what is the soul. We're ignorant, right? The soul appears to be within nature and nature within the soul. So Krishna answers him, the material nature and its enjoyer are clearly distinct. So he's telling them, no, yes, they may appear like that, but they're distinct, they're different. We are different from this material world. We are the soul, so-called enjoyer. The body undergoes 9 stages of manifestation, which are brought about by association with the qualities of material nature. And then he specifies them: impregnation, gestation, birth, childhood, youth, maturity, middle age, old age, and death. So the body goes through that, but the soul doesn't. From the death of one's father and the birth of one's son, a person can easily comprehend the rise and fall of his own body. Sometimes the nonsensical people will say, hey, prove that I will die. How do you know I'm going to die? Well, your father has passed away. Your mother has passed. Your grandfather has passed. Your grandmother has passed. Your uncles and great uncles and aunties, they all passed away. Your friends and you think you're going to live forever? Nonsensical arguments. The soul, who is a perceiver, is different from this body. But when there is no knowledge of the true facts, the living entity, confused by the objects of sense gratification, achieves his designation within the cycle of material existence. The speculative argument of philosophers, this world is real. No, it is not real, is based upon incomplete knowledge of the Supreme Lord. It doesn't make a difference. We know this, the nature of this world is temporary. It doesn't exist forever. That's material nature, what it's like. But the Atma lives forever. The Paramatma lives forever. The Supreme Lord lives forever. And they are the reality. So then Uddhava inquires more. The intelligence of those dedicated to fruitive activities is certainly deviated from you. Please explain to me how such persons accept superior and inferior bodies by their materialistic activities and then give up such activities. So why? How do they accept? Sometimes the body of an animal, sometimes a demigod. How is this happening? He's amazed. Why are people going through these changes? Krishna replies that the mind, which is filled with idea of fruitive work, simply takes the senses with it from one body to another, while the soul follows along. So when we leave this body, the subtle body, mind, intentions, ego, carries a soul into its next body. And the subtle body within it has the enjoyment propensity, i.e., the senses. And it gets a suitable body, so that those senses can enjoy according to one's karma and desires. The mind always meditates on the objects of the senses. So we're always thinking about something like food or, nice material possessions, relationships. It loses its ability to distinguish past and future. When the soul passes, so what does that mean? Loses it. It keeps forgetting that we've done this over and over again. We've associated with this material world. To the past, we've been here so long, and it forgets we're going to continue to live here forevermore as long as we remain attached to these sense objects. When the soul passes from the present body to the next body, which is created by its own karma, by his own karma, he completely forgets the experience of the previous body, identifying with the new body. Just as a person experiencing a dream or daydream does not remember his previous dreams or daydreams, a person situated in his present body, although having existed prior to it, thinks he has only recently come into being. The mind creates the identification with a new body as the reality of the soul. So we are thinking, this is it. This is our permanent position. But it's not, because we will soon leave this body. Material bodies are constantly changing by the force of time. Impregnation, gestation, birth, infancy, childhood, youth, middle age, and old age, and death are the 9 ages of the body. But because of the subtle nature of time, no one can see this. So we forget, it's so easy to forget because we're thinking with this body. We can't see that the body has changed so much. We can't be the body because we're the same person. But yet the body has changed again and again. So the point is that we forget. Although the material body is constantly undergoing transformation, those who are wasting their lives falsely think that each stage of the body is the person's real identity. So right now, for example, we'll be thinking, yes, this is my real, this is what I am. But actually, I'm the soul, and this body is not connected to the soul. Although the material body is different from the self because of the ignorance due to material association, one falsely identifies oneself with the superior and inferior bodily conditions. So this is the superior and inferior. By the death of one's father or grandfather, one can surmise one's own death. And by the birth of one's son, one can understand the condition of one's own birth. The witness of birth and death of the material body remains separate from it. So we will remain separate. Living entity continuously wanders under the spell of material world, taking birth as a sage sometimes, as a demigod. So when he's predominated by the mode of goodness, amongst the demons or the human beings, when he's predominantly influenced by the mode of passion, and in the species of ghosts, spirits, and animals, when he's predominated by the mode of ignorance. So Krishna's giving a nice outline here, where we'll end up depending on which mode is predominant. But the spirit soul does not engage in the enjoyment of sense objects. Rather, it is the senses that perform this activity. And the chief of the senses is the mind. Therefore, the living being has no actual need for sense gratificatory pleasures, with the exception of those peaceful personalities who have taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and are dedicated to the divine duty of his service. Everyone including so-called learned scholars, inevitably are overcome by the all-powerful material nature. No exceptions, apart from a few. Krishna advises Uddhav to try to not enjoy sense gratification with the material senses, as illusion based on material duality prevents one from realizing the self. So if we're too engrossed in sense enjoyment, it's very, very hard to perceive the soul or realize the soul. Even though neglected, insulted, ridiculed, or envied by bad men, or even though repeatedly agitated by being beaten, tied up, or deprived of one's occupation, spat upon, polluted with urine by ignorant people. One who desires the highest goal in life should, in spite of all these difficulties, use his intelligence to keep himself safe on the spiritual platform. It's very easy, especially in this world, to get very carried away with our attitudes, especially if somebody insults us. There's nothing more painful except when somebody insults us. So then Arjun, in reply to Krishna, he asked this amazing question. He said that the conditioning of one's personality in material life is very strong. And therefore, it is very difficult even for learned men to tolerate the offenses committed against them by ignorant people. Only your devotees who are fixed in your loving service and who have achieved peace by residing at your lotus feet are able to tolerate such offenses. And we'll see tomorrow how Krishna gives us the pastime of the Avanti Brahman who tolerated so many things. Very interesting. So I wanted to stop there. That's the end of chapter 22, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Any questions, any comments? Okay, so we can stop. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.